So, usually when we think about a massive collapse, um, we picture something like an earthquake.
Right, yeah, something
Yeah,
huge.
exactly. Something sudden, violent, and just, completely undeniable.
Yeah.
Like the ground shakes, the walls come down in this massive cloud of dust,
Oh, for sure.
and everyone looking at the wreckage knows exactly what just happened and, well, why it happened.
Right, the cause and effect are just right there in front of you. It's a highly visible, loud catastrophe.
Exactly. But then you have this totally different kind of collapse, the termite
Oh,
collapse.
yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Right. Because this one is so insidious, mainly because everything looks completely fine from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the house is freshly painted, the roof is perfectly intact, the landscaping is like absolutely perfect.
You'd never know.
You'd never know. But inside, the foundation has been completely hollowed out in absolute silence.
Just waiting.
Exactly, just waiting for the slightest breeze to bring the whole structure crashing down. And that invisible, silent rot is exactly what we are looking at today. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're looking at a document that takes one single, honestly, pretty easily overlooked sentence from an ancient book, specifically Hosea chapter 7, verse 7, and, well, it uses it to examine a very uncomfortable truth about human nature.
Yeah, it uses that one verse, which reads, "Not one of them calls on me," to bridge this huge gap of thousands of years.
Thousands of years after.
Right. We are tracking the author's argument here, which connects the violent, chaotic collapse of an ancient kingdom to this deeply modern critique of human complacency. The source is essentially holding up a mirror to the reader and asking, are you doing the exact same thing?
Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we get into the really heavy psychological and spiritual critique, we really have to understand the physical reality these people were living in.
We definitely do. Context is everything here.
Right. So the backdrop here is the northern kingdom of Israel during the days of the prophet Hosea. And the political reality described in our source document is, it's basically a tinderbox.
It really is. The author paints a picture of a society where the leadership was just completely unstable.
Yeah.
Kings weren't peacefully succeeding each other at the end of some long, prosperous reign. The transfer of power was happening through conspiracy, assassination, and betrayal.
Wow.
Yeah, assassination had essentially become the standard operating procedure for gaining any kind of political leverage.
Reading that section, I couldn't help but picture this incredibly modern, utterly ruthless corporate environment.
Oh, like a hostile takeover.
Yes, exactly. You know those cutthroat companies where the executives are just endlessly plotting against each other in the boardroom?
Oh, absolutely.
Like they're orchestrating these hostile takeovers just to oust the CEO, forming all these
Yeah.
temporary alliances, just to climb the ladder.
Right. Yeah.
Except, in this ancient setting the author is describing, the takeovers involve literal bloodshed.
Yeah.
I mean, the severance package is just death.
Yeah, it's a very final severance package.
Seriously. The paranoia must have been absolutely suffocating for these people. You're living in a society where your leader might literally be killed tomorrow by the guy who just, wants his job.
The stakes are absolute and the environment is just entirely toxic.
Yeah.
But the author doesn't just dwell on the historical bloodshed here. The text uses this really striking metaphor to argue that the nation wasn't just politically broken, it was spiritually diseased. It describes their inner lives as restless and corrupt. The specific phrase it uses is comparing it to a fire that never goes out.
A fire that never goes out. Wow. That implies this endless, consuming ambition, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like an anger that's just constantly burning right beneath the surface, just waiting for more fuel.
Exactly. It suggests this violence wasn't just, a string of unfortunate historical events or just a few bad apples in leadership.
Right. It was deeper.
Much deeper. It had become an ingrained societal pattern. The author connects the macro-level political violence directly to the micro-level inner lives of the people.
Okay, wait, so how does that connection actually work according to the text?
Well, from this perspective, the external chaos, like the assassinations, the plotting, all of that, is just the smoke. The internal fire is the actual root cause.
I see.
Yeah. When people follow their own unyielding desires without considering God or anyone else, the inevitable result, according to the source, is destruction. The text argues that their inner moral blindness directly caused their external political collapse.
So we have this kingdom that is literally on fire. External violence is absolutely everywhere. The political system is just eating itself alive. But following the author's logic, the argument takes a really, really unexpected turn here.
It does.
Because the destructive fire of their political actions isn't actually presented as the worst part. The ultimate tragedy, according to the author, is what is not happening.
Right.
It's this profound silence.
Yeah. The entire argument anchors on that short quote from Hosea. Not one of them calls on me.
And the source really stresses who these people were, which I think is key.
Definitely.
Because these were not outsiders who had, never heard of the Lord. These were God's people.
They have the historical resume.
Exactly. They had the resume. They were the direct descendants of those who had experienced massive historical events. We're talking deliverance, covenants, faithfulness.
They knew the history.
They knew it. It would be like having a direct personal emergency hotline to the CEO of the universe and choosing instead to try and put out a raging fire with a squirt gun.
That's a great way to visualize it. Yet, in their distress, in the middle of all this violent upheaval we just talked about, they didn't seek him.
Nope.
They didn't turn to him in repentance or cry out for mercy. What's fascinating here is how the author frames this failure not just as bad behavior or like political corruption, but as a deep relational betrayal.
Yeah, the text presents it as the grief of a God whose people have completely abandoned their relationship with him. Instead of crying out, they just relied entirely on their own schemes. But I keep getting stuck on this idea of silence, honestly.
Why is that?
Well, why is this silence framed as the core tragedy? I mean, assassination and literal bloodshed seem pretty horrific. Is the author really arguing that extreme self-reliance is worse than the violence itself?
Well, according to the framework of this text, the violence is merely a symptom.
Yeah.
The silence, that absolute stubborn self-reliance, is the underlying disease. From the source's theological standpoint, when humanity decides it doesn't need God and relies entirely on its own strength, the inevitable destination is moral collapse.
Wow.
The silence represents the total severing of the lifeline. They were drowning in their own political bloodshed, and instead of reaching for a life preserver, they just kept trying to swim on their own, pulling each other under in the process.
So they are entirely self-reliant and completely silent toward God. But here is the strange paradox of this whole situation that the text brings up.
Right, the religious aspect.
Yeah, because even though they were silent in terms of a genuine connection, they were actually incredibly busy.
Very busy. They were busy with outward religion.
Right.
The text points out that some of them still claimed to worship the Lord, but the practice was completely corrupted. They mixed the worship of God with idols.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. They would literally create images, like physical representations of other gods, and then call those idols Jehovah.
I mean, it's like buying a cheap, unreliable knockoff watch out of the trunk of a car.
Right.
And then slapping a high-end designer logo on the dial and pretending it's a real Rolex. You put the right name on it, you wear it on your wrist, but the substance is entirely fake.
Totally fake.
The brand name is just being used to legitimize something completely fraudulent.
That analogy perfectly captures the absurdity of their actions, honestly. The text argues that their worship was reduced to outward rituals with zero inward devotion. The author explicitly calls it idolatry disguised as religion. And this leads to a terrifying psychological and spiritual state described in the source, the hardened heart.
But how does a heart actually get hardened in that way? Because if I'm showing up, going through the motions, participating in the rituals, and saying the right names,
You think you're fine.
yeah, I probably feel like I'm doing the right thing. So how does the author differentiate between going through the motions and actual devotion? Because it seems like it would be incredibly easy to just fool yourself.
Well, that cognitive dissonance is exactly what the author is warning about.
Okay.
The danger of a hardened heart, at least as defined here, is the ability to continue in heavy routine religious activity while remaining completely disconnected on the inside.
So you look good on paper.
Right. It's the capacity to say the right words, attend the rituals, and hold the idols you've conveniently named Jehovah, while your inner life remains totally consumed by your own desires. You basically trick yourself into thinking you are spiritually healthy strictly because you are religiously busy.
You're doing all the stuff, so you assume you're fine. Meanwhile, the termite rot we talked about earlier is just hollowing out the foundation.
Exactly. And that concept of the hardened heart is the bridge the author uses to cross over from ancient history to the present day.
Yeah, this is where it turned.
Because we've been analyzing the political and spiritual failure of an ancient kingdom from nearly 3 millennia ago, but then the author suddenly pivots and looks directly at the modern reader, specifically addressing the modern Christian.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
It really does.
Because the text takes all those ancient problems, the idolatry, the empty ritual, the profound silence, and translates them directly into modern terms. The author warns that a modern person can be totally surrounded by spiritual things. You can be immersed in church culture, reading scripture, singing worship songs.
Going through all the motions.
Exactly. You might speak of God constantly and serve in his name, and yet your heart might not be actively seeking him. It's that same illusion of stability.
The house looks great from the street.
The house looks perfect from the street.
But the text forces a very uncomfortable look at daily life. In your decisions, your struggles, and your fears, do you actually turn to him?
Right.
Or do you rely on your own understanding and your own clever plans, much like the ancient Israelites relied on their political schemes?
And the concept of idolatry gets a major modern update in the text, too.
Oh, yeah?
Modern idols don't usually look like carved statues of wood or stone sitting in some temple. The author argues they look like ambition. They look like success, recognition, or comfort. But I have to ask, is the source arguing that wanting to be successful or wanting to be comfortable is inherently sinful?
That's a very common question here.
Like, are we just not supposed to have ambition in our careers or our lives?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the author's argument, there is a distinct and important nuance.
Okay, what is it?
The text explicitly states that these desires may not always appear obviously sinful. A desire for success or the hope for a comfortable life isn't, in isolation, presented as an evil thing by the author.
So where's the line drawn then? When does a normal desire for, say, a promotion or a comfortable home cross over into ancient Israelite territory?
The author argues they only become idols when they take the place of God. It's a matter of hierarchy and dependence. The modern reader might chase after things that seem good or satisfying, but if the pursuit of that ambition or the protection of that comfort becomes the ultimate driving force of your life...
If it consumes you.
Exactly. If it leads you into pure self-reliance and pulls you away from a genuine connection, then it has become an idol. It has basically taken the throne.
So if your ambition requires you to go through life entirely on your own strength, plotting your own course without ever showing vulnerability or genuinely seeking guidance...
Then you're right back in Hosea.
Right. You are essentially recreating that ancient fire that never goes out. You're just wearing a modern business suit instead of ancient robes.
And the really insidious part, according to the text, is that you can do all of that while maintaining a flawless facade of empty religiosity.
That termite rot again.
Exactly. Attending religious services or reading texts can become mere routine. Your actions might appear incredibly faithful to everyone around you.
Because you've got the freshly painted house.
You look like the house with the perfect paint job. But if your heart remains distant, you are just going through the motions. You are silent.
So what does this all mean? We have the disease.
Right.
We have the historical example of the ancient kingdom burning itself to the ground. And we have the modern translation of ambition and empty routine hollowing us out from the inside.
The full picture.
Yeah. So if going through the motions while chasing success is the disease, what does the author present as the cure?
The deep dive of this text ultimately leads us back to the meaning of that core phrase from Hosea, calling on the Lord. The author spends the final section defining what that actually requires in practice.
And it's not just about talking, right? It's not just reciting a specific prayer when things get tough and you need a bailout.
No, not at all. The text defines it as a posture of dependence.
A posture of dependence. Wow. That implies a full-body, whole-life orientation.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just a temporary reaction to a crisis, but a permanent stance.
It requires recognizing an absolute need for him, seeking his presence, and trusting him with your life. The text says it involves crying out in sincerity, whether that is in weakness, in repentance, or simply in deep longing.
So what does that actually look like day to day?
Well, think about what a posture of dependence actually looks like on, say, a random Tuesday morning.
Right.
It's not necessarily a dramatic emotional breakdown. It might just be pausing before a major career decision or stopping in the middle of a heated conflict with a spouse and genuinely asking for guidance rather than immediately reacting with your own clever strategy.
So it's an active, continuous relinquishing of control.
Exactly. And human beings naturally hate giving up control.
Oh, we hate it. We want to be the CEO of our own lives. We want to orchestrate the hostile takeovers when necessary, right?
We really do.
And crucially, the author emphasizes seeking him in every single moment of life, not just when the house is actively falling down.
Right.
The argument is that God does not desire mere outward worship. He desires hearts that actually seek him.
Which raises an important question for anyone reading this document.
What's
It strips away the comfort of that designer label religion we talked about earlier. The author is basically asking, are your actions rooted in a genuine inward connection and dependence?
Or are they fake?
Right. Or are they just empty outward performances designed to mask a totally self-reliant life?
The author leaves the reader with a final plea, basically saying, do not be like the people of Israel who followed their own desires and neglected the Lord. Don't be satisfied with a form of godliness that lacks true devotion. Turn away from self-reliance, turn away from the empty routine, and return to genuine connection.
Because the tragedy of Israel was not only their sin.
It was their silence.
Exactly. It was their silence toward God, masked by empty routine and self-reliant ambition. And the author believes that danger is just as present today as it was nearly 3 millennia ago.
It really is a powerful piece of writing. I mean, taking a historical footnote about a collapsing, violent kingdom and turning it into a very uncomfortable mirror for the modern soul.
It demands a level of self-reflection that, frankly, isn't always easy to confront.
It certainly does. Yeah. And as we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked a lot today about the author's concept of the hardened heart, that terrifying ability to look perfectly fine on the outside while being totally disconnected on the inside.
It's a termite rot.
The termite rot, exactly. So think about your own life, expanding on what we've discussed today. Where in your life, whether that's in a spiritual context, in your deepest relationships, or even in your career and ambitions, where are you just going through the outward motions?
Yeah.
Where are you relying entirely on your own schemes and your own strength, keeping up the perfect exterior of the house while remaining totally disconnected and silent on the inside?
Are you actively addressing this silent rot, or are you just applying another coat of paint?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.